This is Armalyte on the Commodore 64. This game was published by Thalamus. I think it was 1988. I was looking there, yeah. And yeah, it's a side-scrolling shooter. Another one in the line of side-scrolling shooters that Thalamus came out with. Sanction, or I can't know how you say that, but anyway, I've done a video for that, and Delta. Now this was kind of touted as being a sequel to Delta, although to be fair it isn't really as such. Well, I don't think it is anyway. It played quite a bit different. Those of you that watch the Delta video will know how annoying the power-up system was, and although it can be a bit annoying in this, it's nowhere near as bad. I absolutely loved this game when it came out. I was a big fan of the horizontally scrolling shooters at the time, and the vertically scrolling ones as well, as explained in the 1942 and 1943 videos that I already have up. And I loved it. I loved the graphical style. I loved the gameplay. I was actually quite good at this in the way back then era. So actually going back and playing this now was a bit of a learning curve. There are some areas like this here which are a bit of a tight fit, but once you know what's coming up, it becomes quite a bit easier. It is certainly a challenging game. It does have one of those systems where if you lose a life, your weapon, you do lose some of your weapon power-ups. That's the important thing. You don't lose all of them, you lose some of them. Some games are brutally hard in that respect, and essentially losing a life the further on you get into a level, or the further on you get into the game, is essentially a death sentence, because you've got absolutely no chance at all in being able to recover. Not so much the case in this one. Obviously it borrows elements, as you saw there, from other scrolling shooters, like R-Type with sort of power-up laser shot thing and what have you. But I think stylistically speaking, it had quite its own thing going on at the time. I mean, you could... Well, Thalamus as a whole had a very stylistic way of presenting their games, and it was always very apparent when you were playing a Thalamus game. These type of graphics were quite commonplace in their stuff. But certainly, if one takes Sanction, Delta and Armalyte as the three scrolling Thalamus shooters at the time, I think this one is by far and away the best of the three. The other two have a lot of really unfair death scenarios in them, and although this can be really tough, it is possible to learn, and it is possible to get through certain areas. I mean, stuff like that would happen, but as you can see, there is a pattern to it. It's just a case of learning it, and once you learn it, it became easier. And like I say, you were assisted by the fact that you didn't lose all of your weapon power-ups if you died, unless of course you died after your first weapon power-up, of course. So there was, quite a degree of playability with the game too. The one drawback I do remember on the C64 version on tape, and I had this obviously on tape at the time, was it was a multi-load. But that was quite commonplace. But in games like this, where you can die quite quickly, sometimes early on in playing the game, and you'd be sat looking at the loading screens more than you would actually play the game, until you got better at it and was able to progress. And certainly that could be a flaw with games on tape that were multi-load. Dying frequently meant loading frequently. Some multi-load systems were better than others. Some, stored all the level data on the flip side of the cassette, which made life a lot easier. Some actually just told you to stop the tape and hit 0 on the tape counter, then press play. Now those ones could be a real pain in the arse, because if you rewound the tape and you were sometimes fractionally just out, and you press play, it might try to load a bit of previous data in and corrupt the whole load, and you have to load the whole bloody thing again. A lot of it was down to just how the multi-load was set up on the system. I don't recall that being so much of an issue with Armalyte, and certainly playing a disc-based version of it makes life a lot easier. But there were still, you know, disk access loading times, and I've edited them out of this video because they are a giant pain in the arse. So yeah, I mean, that is probably the main downside to it. I know some people don't like these type of games because they are very tough, but I think this was perhaps, out of a lot of the 8-bit games in that era, was one of the more fairer ones that I come across. Certainly one of the more playable ones anyway. The only thing you could have to be careful of was going down dead ends, like trying to get that power up there. That was obviously set as a bit of a trap for the player. If you went after that, your chances are, unless you had lightning fast reflexes, you were going to die. So you had to be careful of them. That was a favourite of some of the level designers of scrolling shooters, is to send you down dead ends. The one game that did that, but I didn't mind so much, was Xenon 2. Because you could actually scroll backwards. That was the vertically scrolling shooter, and you could scroll backwards. So you have mid-level boss battles like this one here, and again it's just about learning patterns, not overly tough. And then you'd have the main end of level boss battles. So this was one of my favourite shoot-em-ups on the Commodore 64. Like I said, graphically, sound-wise, I was really impressed with it. I remember it getting quite high marks back in the day. You had to be a bit careful with some of the marks that Thalamus games got, especially when you're dealing with Zap 64. Because here's the end of level boss now. Because there were, if I remember correctly, I think that some members of Zap 64, maybe one of the team there, actually did work for Thalamus. I don't mean necessarily they were a Thalamus employee, but I think they wrote the manuals for Thalamus games or something like that. I seem to recall that anyway. I seem to recall that there was there was a whole thing going on with them in that sense. So yeah, I mean, you know, you always had to be mindful of that. It's interesting that I saw an interview with Gary Gracie of Ocean Software recently. I think it was only put up last week. And he was actually talking about the fact that, you know, magazine reviews that weren't favourable towards his games and stuff. And he would talk about the fact that he wouldn't be happy, and he would let the magazines know because he was spending considerable ad revenue with them. You know, and that, when people talk about, you know, maybe degrees of journalistic corruption today with games journalists and stuff, you know, the whole thing is as old as the hills. It's not saying that it's right, because it certainly isn't. There should be an, you know, thorough impartiality with it all, because at the end of the day you're supposed to trust, you know, well, any kind of video game review is supposed to be consumer facing. It's supposed to be, you know, about there's another trap there, you've got a couple of nice power-ups, but you definitely don't want to go down there. Yeah, anything that's supposed to be consumer facing like that should put the consumer first and not the interests of the reviewer first, or the company the reviewer is working for. You know, that the consumer is your customer. The consumer should be what you put first, not ad revenue. And sometimes those are two very conflicted things. They don't always work out that way. But yeah, but I mean, in this case, I think the high scores were justified, and it wasn't just Zap that gave out good scores. I mean, the Thalamus games on a whole tended to have very high production values, in my opinion. I think they were very well made games. You know, they were, I won't say it was a guarantee of quality, but I think it's certainly fair to say that, you know, they had a good quality to them that made them very appealing. I certainly enjoyed playing more Thalamus games than I did not like playing them, shall we say. So, you know, I think it would be fair to say that they were, generally speaking, worthy of the high scores that they got. So anyway, that's Armalyte for the Commodore 64. I absolutely love this game. It's well worth checking out. So thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned to my channel for more to come soon.